Visions of Mana marks the long-awaited return of the much-beloved Mana franchise, with the last mainline entry releasing 18 years ago. This new installment serves as a perfect entry point for newcomers like myself, and potentially you too, to dive in and explore the rich world of Mana and see what this series has to offer. It's evident that a lot of passion and care went into creating Visions of Mana, but there are a few minor issues to me that prevent it from reaching that 10 out of 10 tier in my eyes. We'll explore those details later, but first, let's begin with the quick spoilerless preview. The story follows Val, who is a soul guard, and his responsibility is going to be protecting and transporting the alms to the Mana Tree, where they're going to sacrifice their lives for the longevity of the world around them. Val's partner and essentially his girlfriend Hina is selected to be the Fire Elm, and that's what starts you out on your pilgrimage, and you have to stop place by place to collect the rest of the alms on your pilgrimage to the Mana Tree. So that's just a quick synopsis, and when you hear the word pilgrimage as a JRPG fan, I just immediately go straight to Final Fantasy X, and this just could be because my lack of knowledge and I don't read enough books, and so I only heard the word pilgrimage in Final Fantasy X. Hey, don't judge me, but that's what you can kind of expect to get out of this story. With it, it feels like a somber tone because, you know, in my mind as a human in the real world, I'm thinking, okay, they're on a pilgrimage to their death. But when it comes to the Vision of Mana world, they all view this as a happy thing because it's sacrificing yourself for the greater good of the community and allowing the world to thrive. Now, when you open up the game, there's a scene that shows you what happened when you don't complete the pilgrimage or you let your feelings get in the way of sacrificing yourself for the greater good of the many. If the Mana Tree is not fed that elemental alm, then whatever village that alm comes from is going to be destroyed. So from the start, you'll get the feeling that there's like a small, tiny minority that feels that this is wrong, but the mass majority views as being selected as an alm to be a blessing and to be something that should be praised and worshiped, and you should inherit that sacrifice with joy. And so while the characters are happy, I see us setting out on this somber journey, and that story, in contrast with this like cute, cuddly art style, is just an odd mix, but I feel like it's working. It reminds me a lot of Dragon Quest XI mixed with like maybe a Ken, I believe it's Bridge of the Spirits. And it's just such a unique take, and it makes everything feel so vibrant. It makes the world feel vibrant. The characters, like, they really just went insane on all the character designs and all of the costumes in the different classes, which we'll get into a little bit later. The voice acting for me in English has been pretty solid. I know that there are a lot of complaints with Karina's like over-the-top Southern accent.
You folks in the habit of staring at strangers? What is it? Are you selling something? Find somewhere else wares.
And at first it was annoying me, but I feel like it's kind of grown on me, and she might be one of my favorite characters in the cast, and I think that accent setting her apart might be what is causing her to be my favorite. Now we're gonna hop into a gameplay breakdown so you can see everything that Visions of Mana has to offer. When it comes to combat, you have square, which is gonna be your normal attack. You have triangle, which is gonna be your special attack. And these are gonna change based on which class you have equipped. Some classes will have special moves if you hold triangle. You have R2, which is gonna be your elemental vessel. And so this is gonna be based on which class you have equipped is gonna do different things. For instance, with the moon vessel, you can throw it and it slows down the enemies that are inside that circle that it creates. And then you have L2, which is gonna be your class strike, which is essentially your ultimate skill. Now you can go left and right to open up the ring menu, and this is going to give you access to your items and pause the battle, and it'll also give you access to your different moves that you have equipped, and you're also going to be able to switch between characters with up and down as you're fighting or just exploring the terrain. Now when it comes to gear, you really just have your weapon and your armor to keep up with. There are different costumes that you can have, but if I'm being honest, some of the class costumes are the best. And so like I got the DLC costume and I've just been wearing it, but I feel like the class costumes are just insane with almost every character. And so we'll get into classes last, and that's gonna be this vessel slot. But then you have your move, which is gonna be the moves that you slot on your ring menu that you can access within battle with your different characters. Now, these are controlled by things that you have within your classes that you invest in, or you have ability seeds. Now, think of these ability seeds as ways to get buffs or use different moves. And so right here I have the Dark Saber ability seed, and this allows me to imbue one of my allies' weapon with a Dark Elemental, which is something we would normally get from the class section, but I'm able to use different ability seeds. And then these vary from, raise, intelligence, strength, attack, magic attack. And so they can be either abilities or different buffs to enhance your character that you would normally see, kind of like the materia system in Final Fantasy VII, basically. And so right now I only have 2 on Val, but you can get more items that drop in the open world that you can expand this slot so you can have more equipped to a single character at once. Now let's discuss the classes. For every character, there's going to be 8 different classes, and these are going to be swapped by attaching the elemental vessel to that character. I can't have multiple characters with the moon elemental vessel equipped, so you're going to have to essentially pick one that you want to go with and mix and match to get your perfect party. And so when you collect that elemental vessel, you're going to unlock their plot, which is going to allow you to invest in the class tree. Now, each class has a skill tree that you can invest your elemental points in, and as you do, you're going to be able to get abilities. Now, the abilities are going to transfer between classes, but some of the passive buffs like this elemental blade won't. So I'm invested in this, but if I were to switch to another class, I wouldn't get this buff, but I would keep the abilities that I got when investing in this elemental plot. Now, each character has 3 different weapons that they can equip. With Val, it's a greatsword, a lance, and a regular sword. And so some of these classes are going to have sword abilities or abilities for that weapon, and those are going to transfer between classes. So if I invest in this, I can press and hold square for a burst spin attack, but if I were to switch classes, I would keep that ability as long as I'm equipping that sword weapon. The class system to me is pretty damn cool. I really like the different costumes that you get, and these costumes feel like things that I should be paying for, but I get them just by having that class equipped. And I feel like the way that this is structured allows you to invest in even classes that you're not gonna play, so that way you can unlock some of those abilities, so that way they can support your primary class that you're going to play. And so it doesn't seem like it's one thing where if you play longsword, you only invest in the longsword abilities. It's gonna be, you go through this entire grid, you see what's worth it to make up your Val character to play how you want it to play, and you invest accordingly. I'm gonna dive into all of the different classes, what they do, and what their costumes look like tomorrow. So if you haven't already, make sure that you subscribe so that way you get that notification, and I'd really appreciate it if you help me get this video to 100 likes. But let's hop into the next segment. I mentioned earlier that there are a few things that make Visions of Mana fall short from being that 10 out of 10 recommendation, and this is where we're going to get into it with our pros and cons. We'll start with the good first before we get into any negative, and the thing that you would notice immediately when you boot up the game is that this game is just so freaking beautiful. They hit this art style on the head, and they use like these pastel colors for everyone's character design that just make it vibrate and jump out the screen. And I love every character design, and that's even with their default design. Like at times, I don't want to change classes because I like that character's default design at the beginning as opposed to some of the class change costumes. You can just tell that there was so much care and love put into this game, and I feel like this is a metric that's hard for me to explain, but I can just tell that they took their time when crafting this game and the world, and it gives me a very Xenoblade Chronicles-esque feel, where with Xenoblade Chronicles, you always have the Mechonis and the Bionis in the background, and you just have these large open areas, and in the background you just see this beautiful landscape that you know you can't travel to, but it might feel like you can. And I think Visions of Mana does that exact same thing, where you're traveling to X destination, they may highlight, oh look, there's the volcano that does X, Y, and Z, and you know you can't go into it, but you just see it vividly in the background popping. That just makes it stand out, and it makes the world and game kind of come alive and integrate with the lore. Now, this is a little bit part of the same point, but I wanted to put this as a separate pro, and that's going to be that the world feels so full. So initially when playing the game, at the start, they highlight where different points of interest are. Usually it's a treasure or something that you want to collect. And at first, I thought this was gonna make me just not want to do it, period, because it takes away the point of like going and exploring and finding things that maybe someone else wouldn't have found. But it's had the exact opposite effect on me. Like a gacha game where they have those red dots and you just want to click them all to make them go away. I feel like that's how this mechanic has affected me. And I found myself exploring more than I normally do just because I know it's there. And everywhere within, like there's just so many points of interest to visit and so many things to do within the world. It's hard not to want to explore it. And it's not like they're making you do this for like, you know, some goofy material that you're probably never going to use. They actually have meaningful things within these treasure chests, like armor, sometimes weapons, all the way to the points that you need to invest in your elemental plot that you can only get from capturing those treasures. And so I feel like that was a very nice touch to kind of complement the game by rewarding exploration. Another pro that I have is going to be, I feel like the story so far has been extremely compelling, and I think I can see where it's going. We have this very cute, cuddly art style with these characters all happy and joyous, but we have the main character whose girlfriend is on that journey with him. And I feel like there's going to be that emotion of, I don't want this journey to end. I want to try and do something. And so I'm interested to see how that develops. And that's just my perspective, you know, spoiler-free perspective from the beginning of the game. This is what I was thinking kind of as an outsider looking in who's not necessarily engulfed in the world of Visions of Mana. Either they're set up like a cult and have these kids convinced that, you know, going on this journey is a great thing, or something has to change to make this journey not just feel so cut and paste. Let's go on our trip on the yellow brick road to get to the mana tree. And so I'm interested to see how that pans out. And I feel like the story does have me locked in to see where it goes. The next pro that I have is going to be the class system. And I feel like it's very easy, and we see a lot of games come out with like a pre-designed party where it's like, okay, this is your healer, this is your mage, this is your tank, you know, and the roles are already set up. And I feel like with the class systems in other games, it gives you diversity to make your playthrough different from the next person, and you can customize your experience the way that you want it. And if I like Palomina more than the other characters, I can play her in 3 different ways to figure out which is the most viable, as opposed to if she was a character designed in a party and she wasn't one of the stronger characters, I'm putting myself at a disadvantage to put her in the party because I like her character. She has a more chance of being viable with the different playstyles. Now we're gonna move into the cons, and these are a few things that I think Visions of Mana is lacking, and it's really just polishing things that I felt would have taken this game from maybe like a 7 or an 8 to like a 9 or a 10 if they hit these on the head. And now the first is the camera. A lot of people are complaining that the fighting is a little clunky when it comes to the early game. And I feel like a portion of that is because you don't have the skills unlocked and you haven't found what class, what character you like to play the most. But I feel like another portion contributing to that is the camera. It's extremely slow. And then when you have the auto, like I think it's called auto focus, where it's going to continuously try and focus, it's panning to reset your vision in a very slow way. Now, this can be overcome by increasing the camera settings to max speed or just using L3, R3 to reset your camera. But I feel like this is something that they could have got right to not make you have to dive into the settings to fix. The next one I feel like is a very big con for me, because for me, when it comes to JRPGs, the story is the thing that I focus on the most and what I get the most enjoyment out of. And the story so far has been on point, but at times within the story, there's a lack of facial expression and emotions within the faces that takes away from the emotional scenes that are in the game. And so there are scenes where they get the facial expressions correct, but there are some scenes where they don't. And so when you have a very sad scene coming, or you're trying to express anger, and the face is just this like cute, cuddly art style, it's kind of like a weird contrast where it's like, damn, I could have been really immersed in this scene, but they're just sitting there with this cute face, and it's hard to feel sad. It's hard to feel angry when they're just smiling at me like, you know? Now, that could be me nitpicking, but as a person who enjoys the story, I feel like it just took away from my experience at times. Now, this next con could just be me not being familiar with the ring menu and the Mana franchise, but I feel like when you're using an item or ability from the ring menu, it isn't as responsive as you'd expect. You need to be perfectly standing still And if you're not, you're gonna click it from the ring menu, you're gonna think it's gonna go off, and you're just gonna stand there looking stupid and nothing will happen. This could be a feature and I'm just not intelligent, but to me this feels like something that shouldn't be happening. It should either queue it up for when you stop or immediately stop you and make it go off. Now that wraps up my pros and cons. I feel like Visions of Mana is a great game that I would definitely recommend and think it's worth the price tag. It's just a few nitpicky things that are stopping it from hitting that S tier video game that it goes down with the greats like Dragon Quest XI, so on and so forth. And so that's my quick TLDR. If you've decided that you do want to buy the game though, I'll have a link to a video right here where I go over some beginner's tips and tricks to help you get started and get your character strong quickly. But thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.